My name's Elliot Arthur-Worsop. I'm a founder and co-director at Football for Future. We work in football to drive sort of social change. We believe that it's such a, one of the most powerful social phenomena in the world to be able to drive like societal attitudes and mindset shifts. I've got a background in the environmental sciences and social movements. Currently doing a master's in power, participation and social change at the Institute of Development Studies. I don't need to go too much into the climate crisis. I think this is why we're all here. I don't need to do any education, but obviously dangerously close to going past tipping points. Having like runaway global warming, and there's a lot of reliance on maybe like phony carbon credits, neoliberal politicians, science fiction technologies that are going to maybe come out and save us. But these are all sort of hypothetical. We're relying on things that might not exist, or some institutions and individuals who've been historically unreliable. So is it the cultural sector that can really sort of drive this change? We've seen culture drive social movements to be able to achieve political change, which was previously seen perhaps unimaginable around different types of issues, whether this is gender equity or racial justice, just to name a couple. And the cultural sector is so unique because it unites people around the world no matter of their socioeconomic status, their nationalities, ages, genders, religions, political affiliations as well. Everybody's obsessed with celebrities or influencers or TV programs, music, sports, teams or personalities. And I think it's a really, really interesting frontier that's really starting to collide with climate action and climate awareness in a fascinatingly impactful way. And we've got some really awesome trailblazers here in the room today with us. So what today's going to look like, we're going to have about 40 minutes of conversation with these guys, and then we're going to open up for about a 10-minute Q&A at the end, and then you can all come and get a picture with after this. Okay, wicked. So to my right, we've got Enna Uwaifo, an intersectional environmentalist, formerly at Julie's Bicycle. To Enna's right, we have Victoria, who is the movement coordinator at Climate Declares Emergency. Next to Victoria, we've got Siobhan, who's the celebrity relations lead at WWF UK. And down the end, Jeremy, can you hear me? We've got Jeremy, who's the head of sustainability at ITV. So yeah, a really cool lineup. It's going to be a great conversation. And I'm going to just pass over to each of them in turn, just to give them 60 seconds to tell you guys a little bit about themselves and the missions for their organizations, and then we'll jump into some questions.
Hi, my name is Enna Uwaifo, and I'm, Elliot just said, I'm an intersectional environmentalist, and I was formerly a sustainability coordinator at Julie's Bicycle. So at Julie's Bicycle, I worked there for 2.5 years, and it was basically focused on the arts and culture sector in the UK. So I worked in the Arts Council England programme, and I supported organisations within Arts Council England's national portfolio organisations to report their carbon footprints every year. And I would also do the qualitative analysis as well, the thematic analysis, to basically demonstrate how organisations were changing it under the Arts Council England environmental programme. So I'll also do compile case studies and etc. And in 2022, I started my master's at the University of Bristol with the new programme, which is the Masters in Global Development and Environment. So it brings together global development and environment together. So that's also why I call myself an intersectional environmentalist, because we're trying to bridge those two things together. And I did a research project in Accra, Ghana, based in basically looking at the textile waste issue of the used second-hand market from the perspective of those who work within the informal informal workers within this huge used second-hand market called Cantonmento Market, and there's a huge textile waste issue in Ghana as well. So I was looking at the textile waste issue from that perspective, so looking at the socio-economic reasoning as to why there's a textile waste issue, if that makes sense. And so now I'm promoting my research. I'll talk more about it because I don't feel like I could explain it in a 1 minute intro, but yeah. Right now I'm promoting my research doing public speaking, writing, and also working as a freelance researcher.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Victoria Burns and I'm the National Coordinator for Culture Declares Climate and Ecological Emergency. And Culture Declares was formed in the UK in 2019. It's really set up to explore what arts, heritage and cultural design can do at the intersection of planetary crisis and social and economic justice. And since then we've evolved to a kind of global movement, but whilst trying to maintain our kind of place-based approach. So we're organised around hubs. There are now about 23 established or emerging hubs, regional hubs in the UK and also hubs around the world. And one of our challenges is to explore how we incubate a global movement without replicating cultural colonialism. So we very much work from sort of local to global. And the reason for the place-based work is, well, there are a number of reasons for that. One is the sort of, it's a democratic approach. It's less likely to, replicate systems of cultural hierarchy if you're working in place. That people can, engage without the barriers of kind of ideological difference potentially in place, because they can come together to create sort of tangible place-based change, which is empowering and also effective. So it's exploring system change at a local level, but also how that manifests between sort of nested systems from local to global action. And we've recently kind of reworded our vision statement, which is about truth-telling, caretaking and change-making, to kind of embed in the caretaking an increased sense of the importance of adaptation, i.e. there are baked impacts of the Earth crisis that are here already that are going to get worse. So it's important that we move from just mitigation to adaptation, and we explore what, how the cultural sector sits within that and what it can do, working in collaboration with other organisations on a community level, national level and a global level. So that's it in a nutshell.
Hi, I'm Siobhan Bailey-Turner. I'm the Celebrity Relations Lead at WWF UK. You could say that I sort of bring the glitz and the glamour to WWF and conservation as such. So in my role, I look at aligning celebrities and influencers to our call to actions, to our campaigns, to our fundraisers. It's a weird job to have in conservation, I tell you that, but it is one which does bring huge impact in terms of knowledge to different audiences. WWF's mission is to bring people in harmony, which people live in harmony with nature. So I look to create those relationships with celebrities and influencers and amplify that through their platforms, whether that's working with brands, whether that's working with other NGOs throughout the practices. Yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you very much. Hi everyone, hope you're enjoying the conference. It's very interesting. I've been working in TV for 20 years, first 10 as a producer, mostly as a sports producer, so actually interviewing people in shorts for a living and making nice programs about them. And then after I got a bit tired of it and wanted to work on climate stuff, so I retrained, I did masters in sustainability, and for the last 10 years been working in sustainability within the TV industry. And that includes both reducing the environmental impact of TV and production and streaming and all this kind of stuff, but also increasingly how do we engage with viewers through our content, and how do we make sure that we can bring a mass audience, raise awareness, inspire action, inspire normalize change through programs that are watched by millions of people. So that's basically what I do. As well as obviously all the joys of being head of sustainability, including the reporting, all the governance, all the fun stuff that comes with it.
Brilliant. Awesome. So Jeremy, I want to start with you. We live in a country where so many people are obsessed with these little boxes that they've got in their lounges. Everyone sits down with their dinner trays and tucks into their TV meals. You've worked for some of the biggest broadcasters in the country, the BBC, ITV, and you've worked on developing the sort of reporting guidelines on climate change for television. It's like a very significant role to be involved in. Can you give us a little bit of an insight into how that conversation has evolved since you've had skin in the game?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, it's been fascinating over the last 10 years. When I started, sustainability within TV was just purely operational. It was purely about cutting carbon. And it was almost like there was a force field around kind of editorial people. It's like, no, you can't go there, you can't talk to them. It's kind of like a whole different world. And over time, we kind of broke that down a little bit. And I think it was 2018 when I was at the BBC, I started to work with the news team, and we created, we reviewed the guidelines about how to report climate change through news. Created some training courses to bring like thousands of people across the newsroom to think about how to report this stuff, differently, to understand the context and so on. And then moved on to talking to the wider genres outside of news, so entertainment, sport, drama, all this other stuff. And the engagement has been kind of slow going, but it's definitely momentum now. It's something that I think probably over the last 4 years, it's been, from becoming something that's relevant within sustainability conversation to now having a genuine network of commissioning editors and producers who are very engaged and who are curious and who are experimenting and who are trying to put stuff on screen. So it's been fascinating. One of the kind of milestones or the landmark we had in 2021 with other broadcasters in the UK, we created something called the Content Climate Pledge that was launched at the COP, whichever it was, in Glasgow. And basically, it's all of us broadcasters committing to doing more on screen to engage viewers. And just the concept, the process of coming up with that pledge was really interesting because, what's the language that we can all agree on in terms of, being non-controversial, but based on science, based on the opportunities that we have and so on. So it's fascinating, and at the moment, I think we're going from strength to strength, and it's really interesting because it's always that tension between, wanting to change everything now, but also meeting the audience where they are. And what we found, especially from an ITV perspective, ITV is all about popular culture. It's all about bringing millions and millions of people. Escapism. It's all about kind of relaxing with your family, with your kids. So it's not about banging them on the head with the hard climate science, because then people switch off. They go to Netflix, they go somewhere else. So it's not even that. It's not necessarily it's not something that we want to do. That would be terrible in terms of conveying the message. So it's more about embedding it within soap, within daytime TV, within entertainment, and trying to find creative ways to bring the topic to life for people who don't necessarily care about this stuff in the first place. So that the solutions are becoming more and more granular, more and more interesting from a creative perspective, and it's just more and more happening in this space. So that's quite interesting.
Fascinating evolution, and I wonder where it's going to go next, and we'll maybe touch on that towards the end. Enna, moving to you now. Intersectional environmentalism is such a fascinating niche, and it's so incredibly important, talking about climate justice and making sure that nobody gets left behind, all perspectives are included in these conversations. Can you give us a little bit of an insight as well, because it touches on everything, whether it's film, whether it's arts, whether it's television, whether it's sports, whether it's literature, what the sort of history or the context is of intersectional environmentalism in the climate discourse, and sort of talk so that we can better understand where it sits in the UK today, and maybe some of the barriers, challenges and opportunities.
I would say that in the UK, I feel like it's not a popular term, intersectional environmentalism. It was coined by some of the more younger in the USA. So they have a collective, the Intersectional Environmentalists, and so they just connect to different issues like racial justice, economic justice, environmentalism, to also kind of I feel like in a way it constrains the movement, or brings it to grounds the movement a little bit more, in the sense of bringing the realities of people's lives into the conversation. I think in the UK, especially in London, I think one of the more popular ways we see it is through Sadiq Khan's role as a mayor. A big part of his campaign was to speak on like the death of Ella Kessie Deborah, who was a 9-year-old who died. She was like the first person in London whose death was actually named to be caused by air pollution. She lived in, I think it was Lewisham, and what they found was that when she had an asthma attack, every time she had an asthma attack and she was hospitalised, it was correlated with how the air pollution was peaking within the area she lived. And so that's also the reason why we have ULEZ ultra low emission zones to protect young kids or protect people with asthma who are living in working class areas that are kind of redlined to have all these like in general in London, black and brown areas are 50% more likely to be exposed to environmental risk in general. And so, and it's also, for black and brown, you're more likely to be poor, working class. And so we're seeing that environmental risk is just, is very much dictated by your socio-economic issues, socio-economic conditions, basically. And it's also, with my own research, I didn't do it in Ghana, I didn't do it in the UK, I did it in Ghana, where I'm talking about waste colonialism, textile waste colonialism, where people are desperate to make, or they're trying to make a living under the informal economy, and they're buying secondhand, or they're importing secondhand clothes into this area called Cantonmento Market, but they don't have much choice in like the quality of the clothes that's coming in. And so what happens is that 40% of the clothes is waste. And so, and they have no choice but to accept this, because this is how they're making their living, this is how they're supporting their family, and the alternatives are very limited. And this also perpetuates waste colonialism, because the Ghanaian systems don't have the capacity to process any of this waste. And so you see it on all the beaches, you see textile waste tentacles across the beaches, etc. And so what you find is that how we're seeing environmental impacts, climate risk, is very correlated with socioeconomic issues. And so I think also with like, I think the program that I was in the University of Bristol, Global Development and Environment, it was a great opportunity to actually explore intersectional feminism and intersectional environmentalism, because it's a course that is, we're seeing many of these courses, it's like environmental, just adding the environmental element in all these different industries and exploring the intersections of how environmental issues, climate issues are connected with these things. And so in Julie's Bicycles, we're looking at the arts and culture sector. It's the arts and culture sector, it's quite niche. Alison Tickell put this idea together with a few people to really just explore how arts can mobilize environmental change. And it's a very creative way of thinking about environmentalism in general, which is to think about how to not be so concerned about putting it in a box, but more how can you expand how you're thinking about environmentalism, where it shows up, and that's what I would say about it.
I think it's fascinating, and I think it's like the most intelligent way to approach climate action is not just focusing purely on climate action with your blinkers on, but thinking, okay, if we do this project or this initiative, how can we couple it up with being able to achieve this other type of social change? I think it's very holistic, and that's what climate justice really is. It's not just about saving the planet and putting certain people first who've got the privileges to be involved in those conversations and spaces. It's about making sure that everyone's involved. I think it's so important. Thanks for that. And Siobhan, celebrities. Okay, so I think it's like super cool being able to work with different voices, different personalities to be able to platform them to drive different types of messaging around different topics and campaigns and whatnot. Can you tell us what does like the perfect collaboration with, like in a Goldilocks scenario, with a celebrity look like, to be able to like work with them on a type of campaign and maybe ground it in some of your work at WWF?
Yeah, to be honest, Goldilocks is very different for different people, and depends on the campaign, the call to action, the fundraisers, but also the individual's journey. When you're working with celebrities, at the end of the day, it is a two-way factor. They are providing for us, and we are also providing them as well, in terms of their platforms and in terms of them looking, making their profiles look amazing as well at the same time. But there are certain things that we do need to look at when we're working with particular celebrities. And I suppose I have to approach it holistically in terms of how I do this. And that's through looking at authentic voices. I'm not going to go to somebody who is not at all passionate about climate, environment, nature, and people. If they're not passionate about that, I will not go near them at all. There is also relevance to the audience, depending on the campaign which we're doing. There's no point going to somebody who's not going to reach our target audience at the end of the day. We want to reach the right people. So we need to align the right celebrities with the right campaigns. Then there's engagement and impact. And I suppose as a good way of looking at engagement and impact is through WWF Ambassador Sir David Attenborough and the impact which he's brought throughout his life and his career. And that impact which he has had has been so culturally relevant in terms of throughout the world, and everyone knows him. But one specific moment in terms of that was the Blue Planet 2 effect in terms of the plastics and the outcry in terms of plastic pollution on the back of that, and how plastics are now, everyone knows, everywhere you go there's no plastics in terms of, well, I hope there isn't anyway, but there's lots of paper straws and alternatives on the back of that motion. And then at the end of the day, we want a long-lasting impact with each of these celebrities who we're working with. There's no point us bringing a celebrity onto a journey for one campaign. We want them to embed that into their lives. We want government to embed it into their practices. We want businesses to embed it. We want everybody to embed these practices every single day. So yeah, it depends on the person in terms of leveraging it, but there's lots of different aspects where we have to go through. And then also on top of that, there's a strict due diligence process which goes into all of my processes in terms of looking at background, looking at the brands which they're associated with. We won't be working at WWF with anybody who is advocating, for example, fast fashion brands, oil companies. We will not go near them. We need to make sure those voices are authentic and they connect to the audiences which we're trying to connect with in terms of our campaigns. Hope that answers. Does that answer it, sort of?
Yeah, not at all. No, of course. That's great. Thanks, Siobhan. No, really interesting. Authenticity is so key, of course.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it's a partnership between you and these individuals.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it's totally a partnership because that makes it more like I said, it makes it authentic. People like another good example is Ellie Goulding. Ellie Goulding, previously to becoming a UNEP ambassador, was always in the climate and nature sphere and has always been very vocal and passionate about those causes. And when she became a UNEP ambassador in 2017 for environment, it showed how passionate she was again, and she's shown her passion through doing speeches, through doing talks, through doing campaigns to call to actions. And in 2021 or 2022, can't remember, I onboarded her as a WWF ambassador, and since then her focus over the last couple of years has been astonishing in terms of indigenous people, forests and deforestation work throughout the Amazon. So there are we have to create a journey with these individuals in terms of it, and yeah, it's all about leveraging all of that together.
Nice, awesome. Thanks, Siobhan. Victoria, we're going to talk about partnerships on a bit of a different scale now, moving from the individual to the collective. Obviously, collaboration drives greatest impact, and that's the sort of philosophy that we want to be seeing to be able to drive the change that we know we need to see in the next decade and beyond. At Culture Declares Emergency, you've been in a unique position to be able to oversee partnerships from the cultural sector with different types of organisations, from policymakers all the way down to grassroots community organisations. can you give us a little bit of an insight into the importance of those partnerships and maybe some, I guess, like secrets of what makes the most impactful collaborations happen?
Sure. Yeah, I think one of the principles and one of the most important things that Culture Declares pushes towards is actually activating communities, not just, culture and the arts is very effective in raising awareness and potentially then scaring people and then putting them off if they haven't got a pathway to do something. So one of the other reasons for our place-based work is that we can engage active and caring communities to work towards resilience and regenerative projects in their places. So partnership working is absolutely crucial. If we're trying to make impactful and tangible change in communities, then you have to work, leverage your power from the cultural sector, the arts sector within your communities to work with education, local businesses, maybe people producing gardening projects and food, local energy initiatives, the local authority, and so on, and health and care and different kind of faith groups potentially, to make some systemic change. And that's the important thing, and that's why partnership working is so crucial. And I think what arts, heritage and culture bring to that is their ability to engage people, empathetically, to provide convening spaces, to actually bring people together, to raise critical thinking, to, arts has a license to transgress. It's there to get people to see things from different perspectives. So that's the power that it brings. And you can see, we can bring our skills to allow, insights into other mindsets. So that's where the sort of culture and the arts fit in, and the actual change is working with that kind of network or ecology of what it takes to create systemic change within a place. So that's why partnership working is so crucial. So to move just beyond showing to doing is a really important move where I think culture and arts plays a crucial role. I can give examples. For instance, say in Hackney, there's Stokey Energy, and they're engaged with the local schools, installing heat pumps, installing solar panels. At the same time, educating kids around energy and the energy crisis and transition. There's Growing Communities, which is a local growing garden group that provides you can get your food, your vegetables and fruit locally sourced. The local authority, Hackney, are they're very green, and they're pushing more for that, and they've signed up to the CEE bill, the Climate and Ecological Emergency Bill. So within that, there are all of those groups. And then there's an organisation called EcoActive, who work with the Parks Authority to find solutions around sort of adaptation and what solutions to biodiversity loss, but also flooding defences and so on. So they have they've used creative approaches to involve local kids and local groups in those decisions about our green and blue spaces in Hackney. So they all come together, and the thing that knits them is the sort of, and then there are kind of local arts and culture groups like Walking Trees, who've done work with Avenue Park Cemetery about looking at the trees and the risks to the trees. So that's a whole kind of ecosystem of groups that can come together to create change using the skills of the kind of arts and creative community that exists within all of those groups. Use creative approaches to think about solutions to our local problems. So, and once you've got a model like that, then you go from the grassroots upwards. So you influence the local authority to be more radical. The local authority or a Labour authority, they can influence their own party. The CEE bill, not all. I think that Labour has their own approach, but now they're taking, which isn't quite as radical as the CEE bill, but our local Labour authority has been inspired to sign up to the CEE bill, so that's actually pushing their own party, which obviously has an effect on government. So, yeah, that's kind of why partnership working is so crucial.
Nice.
Can I just say as well, how important you guys are for storytelling and bridging that gap? And we need culture, we need the arts to tell those stories on the ground, and that's why people like you are important.
So the storytelling, and that's sort of, as soon as you can kind of tell a different story, you're critically reflecting on your existing story and you're exposing the hegemony for what it is. It's a story. Our extractive economic system is a story. It's not a law of nature. Then there are other ways of being and doing and seeing the world that are more inclusive. I could go on, but it will come up in the next question.
It's fascinating. It all comes down to storytelling. I mean, that's sort of like the crux of this panel as well. I'm a firm believer in framing theory, that you can speak to anybody about anything as long as you frame it the right way. And I've got a quote from you, Jeremy. Jeremy said, "For ITV, it's all about meeting people where they are with entertainment and high-profile shows, and weaving climate throughout our narratives, not like hitting them on the nose with it." Okay, so that's like the way that ITV is framing their sort of like climate narrative and climate conversation through your programming. I think it's like really interesting and an impactful way to go about doing it. I was just wondering if you could sort of share some examples of how that manifests in your shows, and also maybe some underpinning of that strategic approach for you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, first of all, you need to start by looking at the range of outputs that we have. Okay, so we have some news output within ITVs. There's certain opportunity to approach sustainability and climate within the news output. Then you have the entertainment, you have some factual, you have sport. So what we did is look at all the different type of shows that we do and different types of audiences and understand, okay, what's the opportunity there? And we came up with like three main pillars of action. One is around informing people and making sure that we make climate and the wider situation we're in, bring that to life for people, either through news, but also we have dramas that do that. There's a drama recently called After the Flood. You can catch it on ITVX if you want. But it's a crime drama, but it happens within a community where there's just been a flood. I mean, so it's bringing climate change within the background of the program, not the foreground. And in a way, we don't talk about climate change so much. There's a few mentions in the shows, but it's about bringing it to life, making the audience feel like, oh yeah, I can feel what this stuff is about. And the news output is also very important for that. The second big bucket, if you want, is about inspiring change. So it's maybe things like the daytime shows that we look a lot. Doing a lot of segments around sustainable fashion and sustainable diets, and cooking shows where you learn about vegetarian recipes instead of just meat recipes, and so on. And there's a range of different ways we can do that in a way that is authentic, that is relatable, that is accessible, but putting the right personality again in terms of conveying that message, and so on. And then the third bucket, it's some of that, but it's about normalizing the change. So making it normal. It's not necessarily something you talk about, it's something that just happens. So within some of the soaps, or some of the other type of shows, you can see in the background, someone cycling or plugging the electric car or something like that. It's not something that you talk about, it's not part of the story, but it just happens in the background. Okay? And we have like different ways now by sort of exploring these topics that helps us to have a conversation with the creative folks, commissioning editors or producers, to kind of drop some ideas, but also for them to come up with their own ideas. I think that's the key thing for me as a sustainability body within the company. It's not for me to tell every single one of them. Like we have hundreds of hours of outputs, every year, thousands. It's more like creating the conditions so that people come up with their own thinking around this stuff and trigger their creativity for this stuff. And then that's partly celebrating some of the successes, inspiring people, connecting them with relevant people across the sector or in other sectors so they can come up with their own ideas. Some of the probably some of the most eye-catching successes we had is also with the commercial side of things, advertising. So Love Island. Love Island. You guys are probably in the demographic for people who watch Love Island, but big partnership with eBay just over the last few years, all about pre-loved fashion. Love Island until a few years ago, what the big kind of commercial sponsor was fast fashion, which is great, and the whole show was about fast fashion. Look at me, I'm just now. And just with that partnership with eBay, it's all about pre-loved fashion. So now the people, the contestants on Love Island, have a shared wardrobe that they can sort of pick and choose the same clothes, and then they share them. And just culturally, that's quite a big shift. And then also commercially, that means that we are putting a spotlight on a brand like eBay, where people can learn how to shop differently, or pick up a new habit of how to shop. And not necessarily think like, oh, I need the one piece of clothing I'm going to wear once that nobody else going to see, but actually, oh, I found something really cool on secondhand and I can sell it again. And it's trying to create those kind of cultural shifts, behavior shifts, but to an audience of like 5-10 million people. And really creating that mass change, taking something that was maybe a bit fringe, but making it mainstream. And that's the thing that the power of that TV, especially a channel like ITV, which is all about mainstream audiences, popular culture, and trying to bring, trying to make that change. But again, it has to be relatable, it has to be authentic, it still needs to bring in millions of people, of viewers, because otherwise the channel doesn't exist anymore. So it's not about, we try to do some shows that are a little bit more on the nose, like, focused on climate and sort of the science and stuff, but they don't necessarily rate very well because it's not necessarily what the audience want to see on a Saturday night when they're just sitting with their family and stuff. So it's about trying to find that mix, that balance between bringing in people, making them feel like having fun, entertaining, feeling emotions through drama and so on, but finding the ways to bring this kind of the new awareness. One of the taglines for ITV in terms of what the purpose of ITV is reflecting and shaping culture for good. And it starts by reflecting, meeting people where they are, and then, bringing the change as we go along.
Nice, awesome, thanks, Jeremy. So we've got about 8 more minutes of questions with these guys, and then we're going to go to a 10-minute Q&A. Yeah, sorry.
No, I had a question.
Okay. Can we save it for 8 minutes time? I'll come to you first, I promise. Okay, cool. So yeah, what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch up the format. I'm just going to ask the question for you guys, and I'd like you to chip in like where appropriate. And sort of playing devil's advocate. Obviously, there's like a variety of different strategic approaches to any type of challenge or problem. ITV's storytelling and climate framing is one, but obviously we're already sort of we know that we're so close to going past various tipping points of irreversible destruction and runaway sort of like hothouse, ecological collapse. A lot of these effects are baked in. We've reached a lot of planetary boundaries. Where does that balance lie between sort of not wanting to be too disruptive and saying and telling the truth about the situation? Victoria, please. Yeah.
I mean, I think the truth telling is the truth telling is partly what they're doing with the ITV dramas, which is reflecting back what people's lived experience. So if you reflect back people's lived experience and they can relate to that, then that's part of the truth-telling process. And I think the adaptation has kind of already started. So we had, for instance, as another example, during art centres venue-based art centres were asked to provide warm spaces during the cost of living, during the fuel crisis. And that's a kind of example of adapting and providing space. And I know there are a number of those communities who then gently started weaving in, questions around why are we here, why are we having to use this coal space, and some questions around fuel. So that's both truth-telling, providing care and adaptation, and truth-telling in one thing, and then working on solutions with communities. And actually there's one particular space that's up at, in Scarborough, one of the art galleries there, and from that kind of warm space, they created a space called Space to Be, which is also replacing civic spaces which have been lost. And on one of their latest projects, we've been working with, I think it was you guys, wasn't it? It was Spurn Point, where the seagrass, so there's the seagrass is dying in Spurn Point. Seagrass is a massive carbon sink. So within this community of people who come together because it was a warm space, they started creating seed pouches. And whilst they were creating the seed pouches and talking about it, it was kind of creative work, they started talking about why we need a carbon sink and why it's dying. At the same time, they're creating these seed pouches were then taken to Spurn Point, and they've regenerated the seagrass at Spurn Point. So perfect kind of, both truth-telling, positive action, and a community caring space. So, love that.
We've got quite a lot of seagrass sites throughout the UK.
Yeah.
Check them out, they're amazing, they are brilliant, and the communities which run them are honestly like astonishing, and their stories which they have in terms of how they got involved, like it's really, really, really inspiring, and I would 100% go and check them out online, all of them.
And now they completely know the story. They know why they were in the warm space in the first place, and sort of connected that to some action where they've taken positive action for change. So now we have, climate activists who didn't realise they were climate activists, and never in a million years would have associated themselves with that.
Just to build on your question, I think it's something that I think about a lot, and I've thought about a lot for the last 10 years. How do you find the balance between just how quickly things need to change and how radically things need to change, and what you can convey within a TV program, and in a way, like I feel like we're all somewhat in denial, about the scale of what we're talking about, and we all have a veil in front of the eyes, and if you just pull it off, then people freak out. So you got to be quite. There's been loads of programs, actually. It's not as if we've not done anything. There's been loads of documentaries, also programs around, how bad things are. So I think it's about, finding the balance between what you expect from a TV program. It can't just change the world. I used when I started a few years ago, doing some training sessions for commissioning editors about, climate. I was trying to blow their mind a little bit on this stuff, and I was like, that's it, I cracked it. I've trained 20 commissioning editors, problem solved, they're going to make programs about it, but no, it's hard. You need to convey this stuff in programs, you need to find the creative angle, and then you think about, okay, what impact am I actually trying to have with this? And think about how people consume, TV or all that kind of cultural, content. They go from one thing to the next, something can have an impact, but it doesn't necessarily, completely transform their life. And then how do you move from that, touching the individual, to actually changing policy? Because that's the thing that's, you're going to, start to make a difference. So where I am now is more around, trying to continue to raise the awareness about the reality of it, but also trying to normalize what a more sustainable society will look like, and trying to break those barriers down so that we can sort of make it easier for people to move forward on their journey, and then trying to normalize action so we build more of a, it's something that's normal across communities, across different families, across people's lives. To move it doesn't move as fast as I'd like, but I think it's about bringing everybody together, a bit in this way, in a kind of mass media, and then so it's going to be the more pointed stuff that really trying to have more impact, but it's a fine balance. And when you talk about mainstream media, it is about, at the end of the day, it's a business, and it needs to run, and it needs to push its face and get revenue. So it's trying to find the balance and how to make it a commercially viable position. We just published a climate transition plan recently at ITV, one of the first one out there, and it's all about how do you find a coherent, holistic strategy for the business, which brings this more proactive, approach from engaging viewers, but also commercial strategy that helps us to achieve that, so we have a sustainable business in the future. So it's bringing all of that together.
I think in terms of WWF on that point, we're quite lucky as a charity, and Ellie, I'm looking at Ellie. Ellie used to be working at WWF as well with me as a fellow panda. But in terms of us as a charity, we're quite lucky because a lot of people see and look at our messaging, and we try to find the solutions and advocate for the solutions, so it's a positive messaging as well. We need to obviously educate and show the not very nice side, but we also need to show the solution so people feel a bit more engaged and a bit more like, yeah, we can do it. And I'm very lucky in terms of my job, and celebrities have the power to divert individualism and bring that community action, because they have communities, they have very loved communities as well who will listen to them and take action if they ask them to. And whether that's voting in the next general election and voting for nature, or whether that's contacting your local MP, or if that's going vegetarian 5 days a week, everybody can play their part in many different ways, but it's communicating it to the audiences through the right voices.
Hi, yeah, so I think because I'm on a freelance journey, I think one thing I needed to take it's quite relevant to people who are doing coming out, doing their undergrad, doing their masters as well, and especially if you're a person of colour. A lot of my work was based on thinking about environmentalism from African perspective, and because I myself am a black African environmentalist, and so in terms of the culture shift or engaging narratives, it was less about the mass mass communication, but how can you get very specific? And one of my master's research provided the opportunity to actually speak about a very specific story related to, well, Ghanaian community. Like, going to Ghana, speaking to Ghanaians there's Ghanaian British people here, even if you're not Ghanaian, you're West African, and you can be interested in what's happening in Africa. And so that also provided me the opportunity to public speaking with an organisation called Motives, who focus on engaging young black and brown people in STEM careers, but they got me in their environmental program, like Greener and Greenwich. And so even through that, just doing that research, I was able to speak to an audience. It was like 60 students, and majority of them were black. And the mentors in the program, most of them were black. And loads of them did not know what was happening in Ghana with this textile waste issue, which is quite massive. It's like 15 million pieces of garment comes into Cantonmental Market every year. 40% comes as waste. The fact that you can even see it in the beaches tells you everything about how bad the issue is, and those people just didn't know that this was an issue, and it engaged them in the sustainability conversation because it was a relevant story. And so I think if you're a person of colour and you can really, one thing I've also started working on is I've worked on now. I have a Substack publication. If you follow me on LinkedIn, you can find it because I post about it. I do the graphics and everything. But one exercise I've been working on is really just theorizing based on that research. One of the concepts I'm talking about now is formless environmentalism. So kind of rethinking what is an environmentalist. Just doing away with the technocratic categories, like the fact that you have to know carbon footprints, etc. Maybe not. Maybe that's not super engaging for people. What I'm trying to transition into is more thinking about stewardship, bringing that concept back, because that's relevant to a lot of people who come from our communities, which is that we have these indigenous roots and histories that have been lost because of colonialism. So, and we have these concepts of stewardship, how we relate to nature. And that's a concept that's been I don't know how to describe it, but it's been forgotten. And it's bringing that back in, how can you be a steward of nature? How can you build connections with nature? And, being in nature can help you with mental health. Just going to a park and connecting with nature as well. And just de-stressing from the stresses of modern life and being on your phone and always on digital devices as well. So yeah, just thinking about your communities and inferiorizing from that place, and then talking about thinking how do you connect with different communities instead of maybe just getting into mass communication. It's part of mass communication because you're contributing to that, and people can think about how they communicate better as well when you're doing that work. So I think. Especially if you're a person of colour in space, really just narrow down as well. Don't forget your community, basically, and how you can speak specifically to them. Yeah.
Nice, thanks, Enna. So I'm aware we've just got 5 minutes left, so good time to open up to the floor, and we've got our friend over here, and he's going to take the lead.
Hi, I'm Sarah. So my question, also, I love your Substack, by the way. I'm subscribed to it already, and I've been reading it for a while now, so thank you for writing. My questions to Jeremy, you said that you talked about meeting people where they are, and I'm a climate social scientist, and I also study all of these relationships about how you can't shock people into radicality and action. But I don't know if you'd agree with this, but you know the inside situation in ITV, and I think the truth of the matter is that there are funders who want TV channels to keep shut, because until recently, BBC, for example, did not want to even talk about the fact that biodiversity degradation is happening because of anthropogenic changes, and they only started after the pandemic. David Attenborough came out with no, not Wild Hours, the one right before. Yeah, exactly. So that is when they touched upon the fact that, climate change and anthropogenic changes. I feel like we don't have the time. I mean, maybe for the global north, they can think about, this is uncomfortable for us. They have time to engage in subliminal messaging, which I think has its place. There's research to show that you don't have to have obvious messaging. You can have indirect ways. But what chance do you think internal advocacy has if someone like you does it within ITV as head of sustainability to kind of push the envelope a bit? Because we really don't have that kind of time, So how do you reconcile all of those things?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is that, as I said earlier, yes, I wish things were moving, quicker and we could, move faster. But again, we're working with an established system, in terms of how the TV industry works, as well as other sector. And you can't, when you work from within, you need to work, how does the system work, and how can we switch? How can you pull levers to shift it over time? And if you're trying to tell the system, no, stop doing this, do this, the system is like, nope, go away, because you need to work within the rules and within the culture that's within those companies. And so it's about one of the approach we've had is to really normalize that change within the industry, and it takes a bit of time. But what we see now is much more engagement. Now, talking about the breadth of change that we need to see that you're talking about. I think it's going to take a bit of time to get the industry, but also the audience ready for it, because we can't move faster than the audience on that. We can't sort of, it's not because we put something on the telly that the audience is, say, oh yeah, that was definitely true. And do you know what I mean? So there's to and fro. As I mentioned earlier, I thought, oh, if we just put it on the TV, everything's going to change. But it's not that simple. And so I hear your point around, we need to move faster. We need to have a much broader, understanding across society of everything that's going on. But we need to bring the whole, the whole industry with us on that, and that takes time.
Okay. 5 more minutes. Okay, sweet. That means we can do one more question. And so we've got a hand in the back over there. Awesome. If we can wrap that up in 4 minutes, and then everyone can just do one final call to action or parting message before we wrap up.
My question is for everyone. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I think when we talk about culture shifts, the audience that we have in mind are people who maybe need more awareness, but they're at least open, I think, to changing their mindsets and their behaviors. Is there any hope for people who are active climate change deniers? Is there any hope to shift their mindsets?
Yeah,
I think there are very, very few actual deniers. I think there are cynics. I think there are some quite dark forces who are not emerging. They're there on the far right, neoliberalists, who, yes, they are leveraging denial, but they know what the impacts are, and the impacts hit the most vulnerable. It's genocidal, it's racist, and they know it. And they might disappear into their kind of, in climate-controlled environments where we all die of Armageddon, starting with the Global South. But I don't actually believe there are that many out-and-out deniers. The danger comes from the neoliberalists on the far right, and they're growing in power, and that's quite scary.
Can I mention as well? I think as well, it doesn't really matter if you don't have 100% buy-in. No matter what you care about, there's always going to be some people who don't agree with you, and that's fine if there's 10, 15. People talk about critical thresholds for movements to become successful, right? And there's you can look at critical thresholds for other movements. Climate's different because it's a much bigger transition that we need to see. But I think that the fact that there's some people that don't care, obviously we want that call to be as small as possible, but I don't think we want to worry and waste our energy on trying to persuade people who are just too far gone.
Yeah. And I think it's more people who are scared, who are kind of deniers or disavowing, rather than they'll say, we showed them the science. But there's people are frightened. That's why they're avoiding it.
I don't know.
Well, it's terrifying.
Yeah, it's a terrifying point.
Just to
Jeremy,
final
you've got 2 minutes.
One final point. It's about normalizing action. If you normalize action, you don't need to convince them or anything like that. You can just build the muscle like taking action, and in a way, that can influence awareness and behavior and sort of attitude by action. So I think that's the main thing for us.
Cool, amazing. I think we can wrap up and just go along, and everyone can just give like one parting message. And I think as well, like some of these guys are going to be around for a drink afterwards, and we'll be hanging around. So if you want to come up and chat, then come and grab them. For me, I think just like one parting thing is that I guess that we've always had like the science, right? We've always had the stats and the facts, or always, like maybe say for the last 100 years, and there really needs to be a big shift around communication. That's like the biggest challenge, and that's what's maybe going to save our backsides if we're going to be able to like plant the seeds to a more sustainable and equitable future. And I think like a big part of that, you know, we're talking a lot about raising awareness, but I think it's about attitudes as well. It often gets like left out of the social change thing. It's not just like let's educate people and let them know about it. Let's like make it more attractive to do this. Obviously, this links in with like, the cultural sector like so significantly. And a big thing that's come up has been about like normalization, and it's like let's redefine what it means to be an activist. I know you mentioned that, Victoria, as well. Like redefine, you know, you don't have to be some like crazy hippie or anything like that. You can just be, you know, like one of you G's sitting here right now, and just like, you know, we're just like young people who it's normal to care. Let's go down. Enna.
Final thoughts. Just reiterating what I said. Like, I think it's good to be someone who's embedded in community and talking about your community and thinking how can you speak to your sphere of influence, basically, like not just speaking from people who are just outside of your influence and trying to reach that level where, like, if you were to, like, explain it in football terms, sort of being like, what do you know? Like, what do you know, who do you know, and how can you speak to your community? And that could really be, if everyone does that, that can be really influential in normalising the conversation.
Great, yeah, absolutely. Find your community and find your tribe, and you know, make a difference on a community level. Find out what's going on locally for you. If you're in London, the South Bank Centre hosted a cultural assembly with Culture Declares last year, and as a result of that, they are forming a Lambeth North hub, and they're going to be conveners for conversations in London. So keep an eye on that, and join Culture Declares. Come and declare.
I'm going to join. Use your voice, use your platforms, vote. Biggest thing you can do, vote. Please sign up if you have. Is it over? Is it over? Oh God! Oh, if you haven't, next. Not for the general election, but for the general election, make sure you vote and and your mates. You spread awareness of that. You know, I'm not saying at all what political party to vote for at all. I'm not saying that, nor can I. But please use your voice.
Thank you very much. Second that. We're in the midst of like a radical change, like historical level radical change, right? We spent generations building a society, a civilization on the idea that, you know, we're separate from nature, we can do whatever to it, and there's no consequences. Now we're in the midst of that reckoning, and everything needs to change, from the political structures, the kind of economic structure, the culture behind it. So for me, I always, you know, it's almost like living through something equivalent to a renaissance, if you kind of go back to a bit of history behind you. And I really feel like we're in the middle of that, and it doesn't happen overnight. It's like says, all right, chaps, today we're doing a renaissance, we're going to change everything from the way we see the world and everything else. We're in that sense. So it's all about what can we do individually to drive that, you know, with the principles that we believe are right, with the, you know, what's within our agency, how can we push our talents or expertise to really drive the change based on those principles, and you know, the change will happen because it's inevitable. So let's be part of it and let's be ambitious.
Awesome. I was going to say, if Jeremy, you're closing a panel and not saying that the revolution will be televised, we got to have a chat.
Leaving that for you. Leaving that for you.
Cool. Yeah, guys, thank you so much for your attention and the great questions, and to the amazing panelists. Thank you, guys.